permission and approval. It's the 13th. It's Friday the 13th and a full moon. So some crazy stuff is going to be going down today, guys. And it's Friday the 13th. You talk to somebody who works in an ER. You talk to somebody who works in a fire department or a policeman or whatever. Weird stuff happens on Friday the 13th. Just a reminder, guys, that your initial posting on the discussion boards for this week, it's a 10-point assignment, are due tonight at midnight, and I'd like you to respond to 2 others by Sunday at midnight. Easy 10 points. Watch the videos, give me your opinions. I'll be checking in on those on Monday. As we always do, guys, we like to start off with a little current events. And it seems like, for whatever reason, ride sharing has been a big deal for us this year because a lot is happening there. Of course, we've been talking about the debate whether or not people like Lyft and Uber are actually contractors or employers. Well, what we're going to be talking about today is actually an issue of safety when using these kinds of services, particularly for females. So sit back and enjoy this video. Thing, obviously. But what do you see happening here in terms of a corporate kind of response? What are your thoughts? Yes.
I think that's like Lyft is doing a terrible job. Like I just feel like in things like that, I feel like it's always better. I feel like in things like that to go too far on that side than not enough.
So to play it safe.
Yeah.
To be more protective of people.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it'll hurt to be in the way because, like how they said, the more drivers they have out there, the more money they'll make. If people find out that they're not taking the proper precautions to like protect them, they're going to lose money that way too.
So it's going to either you have a situation where, on one hand, and I hate to say this, when I say this, I'm not representing my own beliefs, but I'm representing what the corporate belief occasionally is. If we slow down the system, if we do more background checks, if we put more security measures in place, it could reduce profitability. And people who are buying stock or shares of the company don't like that. On the other hand, if we don't take these measures, we're putting an issue of public safety at risk as well. What else is going on here? What else do you observe from this scenario? Are there other things we can learn? Yes.
I just feel like they're taking it lightly, and like since they're not really doing anything about it, it's probably going to happen more, which is going to eventually cause more issues.
So by
and
not,
I feel like they won't do something until it's like a big thing.
so by not doing something and thinking about profitability, the subtext they're sending is we don't care about our passengers, particularly females in this regard. I think that's a definite message. And the thing that was surprising to me, if we say Uber and we say Lyft, which one of those two companies, generally speaking, has a shadier reputation? I've had a lot of people tell me they use Lyft because they think Uber is less good, that the drivers are more questionable. I think what this brings to light is kind of, if you're not doing background investigations, if you're not doing licensing and training, there's something to be said that just about anybody might be driving the car that you're getting into. How do we remedy this, guys? If we got folks who are independent contractors, because right now we got Lyft and Uber who are both saying their people who drive for them are independent contractors, not employees. If they were employees and not independent contractors, are there types of controls or safety measures we might have that we don't currently have? What might be something we could maybe have a better chance of controlling if these folks were employees? Yes? Background checks, training, certification. Think about this, guys. If you drive a taxi in a major U.S. city, you've got to have a license, you've got to have a permit, you probably have a background check done on you. These are all things we do to verify that people who are driving the cars are going to operate in a safe and respectful environment. We don't have the same kind of controls and with a lot of these new emerging types of services. So it's something to think about when we get into a Lyft. From this standpoint here, guys, I encourage you, if you are using ride sharing, and I use it too, some strategies to combat this kind of thing. One of them is just not to use it by yourself. I mean, if you're traveling alone, you really are putting yourself potentially at risk. And I'm not saying you shouldn't use Lyft or Uber. I'm saying the fact that this stuff is happening is something we should give consideration to. Any other thoughts about this particular subject before we get into the material? Yeah.
I'm assuming that Uber has had something like this, so how did they react?
Uber actually has dealt with allegations of sexual assault and sexual misconduct even up into their management. In fact, one of the reasons Uber was in the news last year was not just with passengers, but female employees were reporting mass instances of sexual harassment in the workplace. They were reporting them and not getting dealt with. So basically, it was a very, I would say, a toxic work environment in general. And that led to the current CEO of Uber, or the past CEO of Uber, being outed from the company he helped create because he was part of the problem that was creating that culture. So some of that stuff is even endemic to the culture. Guys, in terms of the industry that's behind this stuff, we're talking about the gig economy, we're talking about app-based economy. What industry are we generically talking about here? Well, services, but specifically it begins with a T. Technology. Technology, when I say this, guys, it tends to be a very male-dominated industry still. And what we're seeing is as these kinds of products and services roll out, sometimes when we look under the hood, there can be some instances of misogyny or sexual harassment that are endemic throughout the company. Is that Lyft's reason for not being more responsive? I'm going to guess probably it's more based on profit motive. If you are seen as being unsafe, or if you have to put additional investments into your company, either way could potentially hurt you. Any other thoughts, guys? Guys, I encourage you, if you are using these services, please be safe. We left off, and we were talking about the idea of a strategic role of HR. The reason we did our assessment a few days ago, or actually back on Wednesday, was to see how strategy plays a role in hiring and developing people in companies. In other words, you've got to know your company from the ground up as an HR professional to be able to hire and recruit and put the right people in place. That's really what this chapter is all about. So in terms of how we make a company sustainable, if you're in the organizational environment itself, the people who are leading your company obviously have goals. If you're a for-profit company, your goal is to make money. If you're in a nonprofit, you're providing a good or service that's not for a profit, such as a university. The organizational environment contains your leadership. It contains your business strategy, which means how do you pursue, how do you make money. For example, if you're McDonald's, you deal on volume. If you're BMW, you deal on quality and market position. All of these things in the organizational environment also create what we refer to as our organization or our corporate culture and our values. When I say the word culture, what does that word mean to you? If we say we have an organizational culture, what is it? Avery, what's an organizational culture?
It is like the way business.
Think about the word culture in general.
Yeah, it's like their standard, how they conduct themselves.
Ian, help them out. What else goes into culture?
Yeah, so obviously that's how they conduct themselves, and like the way most people go about like their routine.
It's true. Are we a formal culture? Are we an informal culture? Are we a patriarchal culture? Are we a more ecumenical culture? These are all ways that we conduct ourselves. And our organizational values and our culture determine what our structure is. If I say that we've got a hierarchical organization versus a flat organization, what's the difference between the two? Yes?
Hierarchical organization has like CEO and president, and it trickles down.
Mm-hmm.
Flat, a lot of people are kind of small.
If you've got a hierarchy, it means you've got a position that's very vertically oriented. It means you've got to go through layers of authority. If you're horizontal, it means everybody is more empowered. And that ties back to our organizational culture as well. And all of these things will determine our business processes. Let me give you an example. We talked a few classes ago about BlackBerry. What percentage of global market share does BlackBerry have in 2019? 0, less than 1%. And you go from market dominance in 2008 to not existing in a hardware basis in 2019, largely due to your corporate culture. If your corporate culture also creates hierarchy, it creates dense processes for people to navigate, you're not going to get things done more quickly. So guys, let me give you an example. Mary Barra. Who knows who Mary Barra is, by the way? Have you heard the name? If you haven't heard the name, she is the CEO of General Motors. She is the first female CEO of an American car company in history. When she took over GM, the dress code was 12 pages long. She reduced the dress code to 2 words: dress appropriate. What do you think about that? What message does that send about her statement on the way corporate culture should change at General Motors? What is she saying? Yes.
Basically, that what you're wearing doesn't affect your work. Just do it appropriately. Like everyone knows what appropriate is.
We sure hope so anyway. And it's also sending another message, because Corey, you're right. What other message is it sending if we've taken all these details away and we're giving you very vague but common sense instructions? What message are we sending to the employees? Yes? Exactly right. We're not going to treat you like you're idiots. We're going to treat you like you're responsible people. So that organizational environment is where we start off. If we get into where does HR fit, HR has to be an enabling part of whatever that environment is. If you've got a very rigid corporate structure, your HR department is going to be dealing with a lot of forms and procedures. Those are also referred to as transactional HR processes. If you are all about changing the company, if you're all about setting direction for the company, that's referred to as transformation. And I know that these may be terms you're not familiar with. I'm not going to call on you, just want to see if you've heard the term in your management classes. Has anybody heard the term transformational leadership? If you haven't heard about it, that's a very popular management philosophy, and what that means is being willing to shake companies up, because the days of companies being able to operate in the same mode for decades at a time is over. That's why BlackBerry went the way of the dinosaurs. So up top here, we've got our organizational environment. In the middle, we've got HR, who's doing everything from the transformational stuff, which is strategic, to the transactional stuff, which is operational. And all these things go into our organizational challenges. If you're a company operating in 2019, you got lots of challenges, man. You got competition. You got the online environment. You have other people who want to do what you want to do. In addition, if you're a publicly held company, guys, who's your biggest person outside your company you have to answer to if you're publicly held? You got it. Stockholders, and even if you're not publicly held, you still got stakeholders, people who are expecting things from your company. They could be investors, they could be customers, they could be people you're buying things from. And finally, what that gets us down to is the idea that in 2019, your generation in particular is demanding what we refer to as corporate transparency. Has anybody heard that term? Do you know what it means, like corporate transparency?
I don't know exactly what it means. I've heard it before.
I don't know, just from the title, I feel like it means like the public can see how you guys operate your company, basically.
Yeah, and why is that important to investors?
So they can know if they're getting into any risky business or if they have any practices that they might not agree with or practices that they see as not successful. I
completely agree with your definition. And guys, here's the other part of this. If you're trying to recruit people into organizations, particularly your generation, who, when I say this stuff, guys, when we look at people who are millennial or Gen Z, there's an element of savvy and there's an element of idealism that go into these generations. And what I mean by that is, you know how to find out information. You know what's going on with the companies you buy from. And you're more civically minded even than my generation or the generation preceding you was. So to that end, guys, we also have the increased complexity of knowing that we are dealing now in companies that operate in multiple countries at the same time. If you're operating in more than one country at the same time, you've got what we refer to as a multinational corporation. And most companies are at this point. Now, there's lots of ways that we deal with multinational corporations. We talked about some of these in the last chapter, so I'm not going to deal a lot with them. Anytime you're taking a business or a business function outside the borders of your country, it's generically referred to as offshoring, even if you're not sending it across the ocean. It's a type of outsourcing. If you got somebody who is from your company and from your parent country who goes to another country to work, they are an expatriate. What is the challenge? Let's say, for example, we have a company and we've decided that we are going to open up a satellite location in France. And we decide to send some of you over to be our management team operating in France. What are some of the leadership and management challenges? What might be some of the issues? Yes?
A different culture. They would work differently than like expected working.
I'd even argue the culture is a bigger barrier than language. Because we can learn languages. Learning culture takes some time. What else might be a challenge to making this work with our parent company? Yes? I'm sorry? Yeah, absolutely. How do you schedule meetings? If somebody's 8 hours ahead of you, it means somebody's either working early or working late. What else could be another challenge, guys? Cultural is a big, yes?
I mean, this probably goes with culture, but like, I don't know how they do it in France. Like maybe they don't work. Maybe they work Saturdays and Sundays, and maybe they don't here, or maybe they. You know what I'm saying? I don't.
I do.
How they operate.
I mean, think about it, guys. If you're talking about, let's say, for example, we're operating in a country that is primarily Muslim, for example. What's the challenge to financing anything in a Muslim country? How do the banks work over there? Does anybody know this? It runs counter to the Muslim faith to charge interest. So if you're a finance company, how do you make money as a finance company in a Muslim country, for example? It's very difficult. So you've got to know the cultures with which you're operating. And furthermore, if you're operating in a country, for example, where women are supposed to be covered, I'm just going by local standards, you might have to require different dress codes. Some of the other issues that come in, obviously working conditions and pay. Our one group who was dealing with Nike as their company, that's a great example. Because we've got this idea of cultural relativism, too. If I'm paying $2 an hour in another country, what's the minimum wage in Pennsylvania right now? $7.25. And I'm going to make the same product for $2 an hour in another country. My immediate gut reaction is, wow, I'm exploiting somebody. Until you realize that maybe the median wage in that area is $1.25 an hour. So on one hand, we could say that we are misusing people in another country. And another angle, we could say we're paying above market wages. So what's the ethical thing to do? Then we get into the idea of quality. If I want to know, for example, let's use education as a construct. If Dr. Fry wanted to know if this was a quality class, what could he do? If he wanted to know the class was being taught, well, what could he do, Jojo? He could do a survey. What else could he do? He's right in the building, so what else could he do? He can come in here, and in fact, before the semester's over, he probably will. That's one of the things he does. When you're operating a country away, it's sometimes hard to do that. We talked about the cultural concerns, for example. You also have to think where your actual loyalty lies. If you're working for a company in another country, your loyalty probably goes back to your home and your company, not necessarily the local workers you're supervising. And that does get us into the realm of exploitation. I'll give you an example, guys. Who here, I know none of you who are under the age of 21 will have ever tasted this product, but who here has ever heard of the Heineken Beer Company? Heineken is one of the largest companies in the world, guys. They come into all kinds of countries. They do a lot of work in developing nations as well. Now, here's the good news. Let's say, for example, I'm Heineken, and I'm making beer. What's my number one ingredient I need to make beer? Well, hops is important. Hops are important, I should say. But what is beer primarily? It's water. You got to have clean water. So if you come into an area that does not have, for example, water refining, you're bringing in the water with you. If you're creating beer, what else do you need to do with it? You need to sell it. You need to transport it. So you might be building the roads too. And you might be building up schools and infrastructure for all the workers who are coming in and all of a sudden are empowered to send their kids to school. That all sounds pretty good, right? Especially if you're paying a fair market wage. Is there a downside to a company like Heineken coming in and lifting up a community with infrastructure? Is there a downside to that? Well, unless you're the local beer brand who all of a sudden cannot compete with the large company that's just come in and taken all your customers. So one of the things that we also have to be cognizant of is we sometimes can, the process we generically refer to it as gentrification. Are we going to come into a given region and take away somebody else's livelihood while we think that we're doing something good? And the other part to think about in this day and age, guys, subcontracting and offshoring does not just happen on labor jobs. If you are willing to share, how many of you have ever had an x-ray? Here's the trick, guys. A lot of those x-rays in the United States are not read by doctors in the United States. They're read by doctors in India. They're read by doctors in Australia. People who are in different time zones than us and can give you 24-hour turnaround. They're board certified by U.S. hospitals, but they're working somewhere else. And the trick is, even people at the highest end of the food chain, we start thinking about highly paid professionals. Doctors are pretty far up there. Even those folks now have to think about what's going to happen with their jobs too. So it's not simple at all. Very quickly, guys, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, not because it's not important, but because we're doing a very kind of superficial look at the international aspect. A although it's something you may have to deal with. If you have an ethnocentric policy, all that means is that you basically are going to have people who come from your main company fly to another location and be the main leadership. If you get to a polycentric policy, what that means is local people will run your company for you. How could that be an advantage? Exactly right. If we had, for example, and this is happening actually in our labor class, those of you who are in that class who are going to be watching this film, there was a plant in Youngstown, Ohio that was owned by General Motors. Went under a year or two ago because it made the Chevy Cruze. Nobody's buying Chevy Cruzes anymore. So what happened was a Chinese company recently took it over. Well, they still hired a lot of local people to be managers to gain the public trust and get productivity. So a polycentric policy creates some goodwill that way. And then you get into what we refer to as regionocentric. All that means, for example, if you get into a dense series of countries like we have in Central Europe, you might have people from multiple regions actually running your company. And then finally, if you've got what we call a geocentric policy, that means that you are going into global regions with people who are experts regardless of where they live. The one, of all these policies, the one I want you to understand, the ones I want you to understand the most are ethnocentric and polycentric. So those are the two I would remember. So going on, guys, when we start talking about planning, because we're in strategy right now, what we really want to know is what kind of availability do we have of the people who we need to power the company. If we're operating in a given region, depending on what our company is and what our expertise is, that's going to determine which people we hire. We hope we are operating in a region that has plenty of people who can do what we want them to do. And it also means that we're going to be hiring the right people at the right time in the right places. For example, if you're setting up a company, you might have a job fair 6 months before you actually open your doors. That's good because you know you've got a guaranteed source of labor. It's good so long as those folks are still available from the time you open your doors. So the way we do this, if we're getting into determining how we're going to hire, how we're going to plan our whole HR process, the very first thing we do is what we refer to as an environmental scan. When I say the environment, I know we think about green, we think about taking care of the environment, but generally, what is an environment? Yes? Correct. Anything that surrounds us is our environment. Because right now we're in an educational environment. For people competing this weekend, you're going to be in a competition or an athletic environment. When you're home, you're in your home environment. So what we're going to be doing is looking at our environments. We've got internal and external environments. When I start talking about an internal environment as a company, what do I mean? What's an internal environment? So I'm thinking of hiring. Yes? Yeah, that's exactly correct. Do you have, if you're planning on doing something new in your business, do you have people you could promote internally? That's your internal environment. Very good. And so, necessarily, then at that point, we're talking about the external environment. What are we talking about? Internal is internal to the company. What's external? Everything else. Absolutely. So we're assessing our internal and our external workforce. For example, if we had an opening at St. Francis, our first question might be, do we have anybody internally we can promote? If we don't, are there viable candidates that we can realistically reach at the salary we can pay? At that point, once we know what our internal and external environments are, we can pile what we refer to as our forecast. If we're looking at the weather, is it going to rain this weekend or not? Hope not. I hope not. For anybody who's on the field this weekend, I hope it doesn't rain. But if we're looking at our HR forecasts, are we going to have more or less available labor? Now, guys, this is a long-range forecast, but for example, if I were St. Francis University and I'm looking at my forecast for incoming customers, I would be scared about the mid-2020s because we're going to see the people who didn't have kids in 2008, those kids are not going to be coming to college now. So my labor forecast might be, I might not have to do a lot of hiring for academic positions in the mid-2020s because my customer base might get smaller. Conversely, if we see, for example, we've got a lot of people who are coming of age and are working age, and we're hiring for fast food joints in a large city, well, I can see that I've got a large potentially available labor pool. So what's my supply of human resources? And finally, the fourth phase in the process is how do we develop the plans and actions So how are we going to retain people? How are we going to recruit people? How are we going to pick who we are going to hire? Before we get into environmental scanning, because I've been going a good bit here, I'd like a question or comment from the audience there. Sir?
I just want to shout out my man Joe, just because he brought him and just everything going. So shout out my man Joe.
Excellent. Well done. I support shout-outs. Yes, sir.
Are you going to come to our game?
This weekend I won't be there. I'm going to be in Baltimore tomorrow. But I'm hoping to make it to as many home games as possible. So, yes, sir.
I want to shout out Corey J.
Oh my God.
Corey, you got 2 shout-outs today.
I appreciate that. I'm thinking about that.
Anybody else want to give Corey a shout-out while we're here?
Shout out Corey J.
All right. Corey, you're the man today, apparently. So, good news. Good news. All right. Well, guys, any other questions or comments before we jump back in? Okay. Guys, in terms of environmental scanning, again, we're talking about internal and external environments. Your external environments are determined by a lot of things. The economy is one of the biggest ones. Like right now, if we are an employer and we're in a large city, we're also looking at 3 to 4% unemployment. Whose market is that? Employees or employers? Who's got the advantage in the market right now? Employees do. Because right now we've got a large demand for skilled labor and not a lot of skilled labor to go around. Again, we were talking about the difference between the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. Right now, our economic external environment, if we've got a shortage of qualified employees and the employee has the advantage, what does that mean to me as the employer? When I'm trying to recruit people, how does that affect how I recruit? Sure. Right now, we've got a sub 4% unemployment, so we've got a very low unemployment rate. We've got companies that cannot get qualified people. If I'm trying to recruit, if I'm an employer, if I'm looking at that external environment, how does that affect me?
It makes you sometimes I think you might have to bid against yourself in terms.
Absolutely. And we're talking about things like, for example, if I got that quality candidate who wants to come into my company, I might be saying to myself, I'm going to have to offer this person 20% more than I would have 10 years ago. I might have to offer this person a flexible work environment. I'm going to have to offer all these things. So in terms of the competitive forces, if we're in Silicon Valley right now, where every tech company in the world is, or if we're in Loretto, Pennsylvania, there's higher competition for highly skilled technology people in Silicon Valley than there is here. So you know the competitive forces. If you got an internal environment, there are advantages and disadvantages to hiring people inside your company. Guys, what's an advantage of hiring somebody internal to your company? Or promoting? Yes?
They already know the systems and the culture.
You don't have to teach them anything. They've already gotten all the learning curve out from underneath them. Is there another advantage? If you promote somebody internally, what message are you sending your staff? Yes?
We want to keep everything in business, like we trust you.
We trust you for sure.
There's opportunities for other people. They see that someone's going to put up in their spot. They're going to work hard to try to see.
I have an opportunity to move up in this company. And on top of that, too, guys, what you're also showing folks is that there is room for development. We care about you. Your organizational culture will also determine this. There are some companies that are almost, dare I say, incestuous. They want to keep promoting their own people. Is there a disadvantage to continually promoting people internally and not promoting externally? Yes?
Sometimes you might lack growth because you're afraid to go branch out.
You're not getting any new thought. It's tough to get somebody, like, let's say, for example, I came up in the system. I was hired, right, brand new, got developed into management, and I know everybody in the company now. Am I going to come in and start breaking things? Generally speaking, no. It's tough. You got to establish relationships. You got people who you know. You don't hurt somebody's feelings, and it's tough to be that person who can be a change maker in an organization you were brought up in. And finally, if you're looking at your internal environment, some of the other things you have to look at. Are we creating new people who could actually fill these jobs, or did we hire somebody who didn't pass on any of their skills? Here's the other trick, too. Sometimes when somebody walks out the door and takes all the knowledge with them, that doesn't mean they're a bad person necessarily. It could have also meant there was no mechanism for them to pass on their knowledge as well. So, again, all these things, guys, help us to identify our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, guys, my plan for this is to do what we refer to as a SWOT analysis. And instead of doing this as a group project, I'd like to do it as a group, as in the entire group here, guys. So can somebody name a company that they are interested in, a company they enjoy or respect? Something that we'll all know. Apple is a very good. So let's start off with Apple. When we're talking about this from a human resource management standpoint, you can see our strengths would be, for example, do we have intellectual capital, do we have good employees, do we have innovation, do we have high performance practices? What would be a strength of Apple? What's Apple good at? Marketing, for sure. So we have marketing. What else is Apple good at? Or what strength do they have?
Quality.
Quality, for sure. The products tend to last a long time. What else?
Like their brand persona.
I love it. Brand recognition. What else? Do you have any other strengths? Okay, we can come back to it if you think of any. Let's talk about weaknesses. What's a weakness you see in Apple at this point in time?
Innovation.
Yeah, no new ideas. So we're going to say lack of ideas. What else? What might be another weakness Apple has right now? Price. What else is a weakness for Apple? Fragile. So durability. So on one hand, we got quality, and the other hand, if anybody's ever dropped an iPhone without a case on it, knows the durability is an issue. Anything else you guys would see as a weakness? How about opportunities? What opportunities does Apple have that they are not currently leveraging? Do we have opportunities or places we can get in that we're not?
I feel like they're trying to get into everything now. With the credit card, they got Apple TV stuff now.
So our opportunities are we can buy the brands that we like, so continued brand expansion. Right now, how does Apple compete? Do they compete on price or do they compete on quality? You can get a Google phone for half the price you can get an Apple. So an opportunity could be price competition, and that's what they're talking about, by the way. The new Apple Watch is going to be a lower cost watch. Are there other opportunities we have? Are there markets we're not in we could be getting in? They are. So we're talking about complete, how do we want to say, new markets? And we're going to say car. Now, what are some of the threats that Apple is facing right now? Yes?
Spotify.
That's a really good one. So we got somebody else who's an alternative to Apple Music. So we got Spotify, and I'm going to say just streaming in general. What other threats do they have? Yes? I'm sorry? I agree. Android. And the thing is, too, when we get, although Apple is a very popular platform in the States, in Asia, Google is a very popular platform, too, and may come back around. A lot of people are jumping ship for Samsung in this country as well. Are there other threats that we have? Yes?
Like other brand laptops, like Windows computers.
I agree. By the way, can anybody tell me why are Apple laptops so much more expensive than IBM? Do you know? Well, definitely, because that's not a wrong answer. But from a technical sense, check this out, guys. Right now, if you buy an Apple product, where can you get the hardware? From Apple. Where can you get the software? From Apple. Right now, you guys have Lenovo's in here. If you're running a Lenovo, if you're running an HP, if you're running an Acer, no matter the brand, all those companies can run Windows products. In fact, even a Mac can run a Windows operating system. You can set it up to dual boot if you want to. So the reason Apple's stuff is so expensive is they've maintained control over hardware and software. The disadvantage to that is obviously price. What's the advantage to that? They can control it, and they've got a more stable operating system. There's actually some talk about, at some point, Apple actually licensing their operating system, which could be an opportunity. Now let's talk about how this stuff goes into our HR and our planning. We start talking about our strengths. Strengths are things that you want to know what powers them and keep doing them. You don't want to give up your strengths. Our marketing, quality, and brand recognition, those are not things we want to give away. And in fact, I would argue, in terms of the brand recognition, that's something we may want to put more money into to maintain that, considering like right now, I would say, and you guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong, if I asked people about Apple 5 years ago, I'd say that you guys are probably about 30% less enthusiastic than people were about Apple 5 years ago, because nothing new is happening now. If you're getting, your innovations are credit cards, you're running out of ideas. So we want to keep our strengths. Now our weaknesses. We got a lack of ideas, we got price and durability issues. From a staffing or hiring standpoint, how can we address these issues? What do you think? What might we have to do?
Hire outside the company.
I would think so. If you are running out of internal ideas, either you got to hire outside or you got to look at your own internal processes. How are we getting ideas from one place to another? I know I bring BlackBerry up a lot, but the reason that company had the problems they had, if you were somebody on the lower rung of the organization and you had a great idea, it was impossible to get management to listen to you. So it could even be a matter of looking at our own internal work culture and saying, how are we processing new ideas? Are we rewarding innovation? In terms of price and durability, if we're having problems with our durability, that could be an idea, or it could be a problem with corporate strategy. Maybe Apple doesn't want their products to be more durable, because if you break it, you have to buy a new one. Who here has ever been to an Apple store and had the solution to your problem being listed as buy something new? Yeah, exactly. That's like Apple's solution to everything. If you don't like it, buy a new one. So if this is a matter of corporate strategy, we're going to have to change it up. Now, in terms of opportunities, we're talking about brand expansion. We bought Beats, for example. Price competition in new markets. If we're getting into the car business, what the hell does Apple know about cars? So what does that mean? What are we going to have to do in this part of things? Research. We're going to need people who can research. We're going to need people who know the auto industry. Probably going to need to talk to lawyers and safety engineers. There's a whole round of new potential hiring here. Yes, sir?
So this is like, keep bringing up BlackBerry, because you see, or like, do you predict like in the next couple of years that Apple will fall like BlackBerry did?
Anything can happen, man. I mean, I look at it this way. And Corey, I apologize for the long answer to your short question, because it's a good question. In the 1990s, the music business in the United States had its biggest decade ever. People in that business were making money hand over fist. Have any of you ever heard of a band called Hootie and the Blowfish? Yeah. Darius Rucker's first band. Their first album sold 5 million copies. The second album sold 3 million copies. Still, a well-selling album. The record company cut them loose, saying, we don't see a future in your band because you only sold 3 million records. In 2019, if somebody could sell 3 million records, they would be breaking records because nobody is buying music anymore. So if you can take an industry that had that much volume in the 1990s that was undone by one thing. What undid the music business in the 1990s? The internet. And you can take it down to these 3 letters. So all of a sudden, you caught a business completely unaware. People started doing file sharing. As soon as we got high-speed internet, everybody was swapping files. Streaming services didn't exist. And this brought down the entire music business, guys. So could something take down Apple? I think absolutely. And sometimes it's something so revolutionary you do not see it coming. Amazon, I think that Amazon could be around for a long time. They've got the system pretty well gamed. But as soon as the public gets tired of you and you can't match their expectations, you could be the next BlackBerry. Is that a fair answer to your question, Corey?
Yeah.
So But going on, so we got our opportunities and our threats here. We got Spotify, Android, and other laptops. How do we address these threats, guys? It's a matter of strategy, too. We have to make the decision. What strategy are we going to pursue? Does Apple currently pursue a cost strategy? No, they go after quality. So if you want the other laptop manufacturers, if I can, what's a new laptop cost? If I wanted to buy a reasonably okay laptop online, what would I be paying for a Windows laptop? $350. And if I want to go even cheaper, I can buy a Chromebook for $200 or $150. So I got to decide as Apple, if I want after that market, I can't do it with my current model because I can't compete there. So if I do want to go after that model, I'm going to have to hire people who know and understand that model and develop the staff to meet it. Does that all make sense, guys? What questions do you have?
Do you see the price of like MacBooks and stuff going down in the future?
My answer to that will be it will depend on what the market will bear. This is something we talked about last semester in my e-commerce class. How many of you would consider yourselves serious gamers? Have you been following what's going on with Google's new streaming service for games? No. Sorry? I forget what it's called, but it's not Twitch. We're actually talking about where Google is marketing something. I'll show it to you in the next class. Google is basically saying that they want to get away completely from consoles. And they say because Google is a big company and they have processing power that's better than anybody on the planet. But basically, if you have a high-speed internet connection, you can play with the cheapest PC in the world and have a better gaming experience than what you're having on a PS4 at home right now. And they're doing this because basically they're centralizing the processing power. Instead of buying a big expensive console, you're going to buy centralized processing power. So as more people adopt that kind of a cloud model, I think that sooner or later Apple is going to say either we got to compete with that or people will just quit buying Macs anyway because there's not going to be an advantage to it. What's the biggest advantage to a Mac versus a PC right now? So we have some Mac users in here. What's the biggest advantage? You got it. And if you're basically saying that doesn't matter anymore as long as you've got a Chromebook as a dumb terminal to get into systems that are constantly upgraded, people will jump ship to that too. I think honestly Apple's got to get into cloud if they want to keep their laptops going. Now, that's not going to kill everything. There's still going to be people who want to have their own computers that work regardless if there's a connection, which is the biggest disadvantage of a Chromebook. But centralized processing, mark my words, is going to change the world in the next 5 years. Good question. Guys, with that being said, I'm going to let you go just a couple minutes early today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. For anybody competing this weekend, good luck.